Welcome to Couch Quarterbacks.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Couch Quarterbacks podcast. I'm Andrew Rochford, and with me, as always, is Ben Steinberg. And Stein, after a little bit of a hiatus during these holidays, we are finally back. We are into the postseason for the NFL regular season. The 18-week season is finally over, and we are back to give you a super wildcard weekend preview.
Yes, they're really marketing this up as a crazy, insane weekend, and we've never had 6 games going on in the wild card round at a time, so it's going to be awesome. Wait, how many games is it? Is it 8?
No, it's 6.
It's 6.
Yeah,
I almost got myself thinking, maybe they add more, but there is so many postseason spots now, as we have added the extra wild card for the first time ever. So more teams have been added that wouldn't have been added. So we are going to see some awesome football. But before we get into that, guys, we want to first talk about kind of the end of the season and have a little bit of a pay respects segment for all the coaches and GMs that we lost throughout Black Monday.
That were fired.
Yes, Black Monday is merciless, and we know that these guys are going to be, some of them probably will be having new jobs, but most of them, there's 2 of them probably that are never going to get a job ever again. So let's kind of go through it, and the guys who were before Black...
we'll go through an order of all the coaches fired.
Yeah, so the first one was John Gruden, fired from the playoff-bound Raiders.
I was going to say the one guy for a team that team actually made the playoffs, and this wasn't exactly a firing that was because of the performance on the field. It was more the off the field, all the allegations and incidents and stuff that happened with him. I remember we were actually filming one of our shows when on Monday night they had the breaking news and everything saying that John Gruden had resigned from the team. So very interesting to see the fact that it's not on the field, but what is interesting is the fact that it was fired because of emails, the racist emails, and all that kind of stuff that they were getting into. He was 22-31 in 3+ seasons, so honestly the writing could have been on the wall even if they didn't make the playoffs. Yeah, they had 0 winning seasons. I think when we talk about the Raiders later, since like we said they are the one playoff team, they started out 3-0, and I think they were 3-2. It was after week 5 when he ended up getting fired. So they did have a winning record at the time and had a nice start to the season. So, but who knows whether or not, if John Gruden was a coach, if they had ended up making the playoffs. It did come down to the wire of the last
That's
week,
true.
And literally the last game of the regular season.
Yeah, and an insane finish there. Everyone was saying it was rigged and scripted, and it almost looked like. But
if it ended in a tie, there definitely would have been some headlines with that.
Yeah, who knows if Gruden stays with the Raiders, where they would have been record-wise. They probably couldn't have made. There probably been a chance they couldn't have made the playoffs. Maybe they won. They lost an extra game because they were just unmotivated and don't like the guy, so he probably could have been out at this end of the season, or if not next season. The next coach to be fired was Urban Meyer.
Fully expected.
Yeah, we put a little note behind every coach, kind of why we think they got fired. And for Urban Meyer, I put everything.
Yeah, it's pretty much something where everyone knew it was just kind of delaying the inevitable. Like he ended up getting fired after their 2-11 record, so 13 games through their season. Yeah. He honestly could have gotten fired like a fourth of the way through their season, through like 4 or 5 games. I mean, that's just how bad he was. It was already a questionable signing when they first hired him, and then just kind of the tipping point was when everything came out saying that he basically called his coaches losers, was getting in fights with some of the veteran players like Marvin Jones.
Yeah, and then kicked, what's his name?
Yeah, the whatever kicker they had to start the season. I don't remember what his name is.
Yeah, I forgot his name too. But and then of course the obvious Twitter video of him feeling up the girl in the bar. Other incidents like hiring the racist coach that was quickly
he hired and then fired like 3 days later. So
and the fact that Lawrence was not developing at all. So he finished with a 2-11 record, pretty much. I
think it's safe to say that's probably the end of his NFL coaching career. Maybe
probably
a potential college coaching in a couple years, but I think NFL, I don't think he's going to be back there.
Yeah, not for a while. Now, this one is
Josh Lambo was a kicker, sorry.
Josh Lambo, yes. So now we're entering kind of the territory of the coaches that have been unsuccessful, not really had an incident, and this was the first casualty. Actually happened on Sunday, not on Monday, because the Broncos
they played on Saturday,
and they let go of Vic Fangio after 3 seasons with a 19-30 record. And I really like to say that he was just old-fashioned defensive-minded coach that couldn't keep up with the Joneses, Roach, and the Joneses being the Chiefs and the Chargers.
Yeah, and I was actually talking about it with a buddy, and I was like, thinking about this Broncos team. It's like, this is a team that's got an above-average defense. They had the great running back tandem this year with Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams. A decent receiving core when you talk about Judy, Sutton, Tim Patrick. They got 2 great tight ends, Alberto and Noah Fant. They've got a decent offensive line. The big question has just always been the quarterback position. I mean, they draft Drew Lock. He obviously hasn't panned out. They trade for Teddy Bridgewater around draft time last season. Everyone thought that they were going to end up drafting a quarterback. They pass on him, get Patrick Surtain, who was great for them this season. But it's always been that quarterback position that's been the big problem for them. So I think once they can solve that issue, then we could see them as being a bigger threat to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and still they had a lot of turnover on their defense too, even though they have refilled it pretty nicely.
And they traded Von Miller midway through the season to the Rams, so and they, like I said, they were still a decent defense this past season.
O-line also left something to be desired overall, but like you hit the nail on the head with quarterback for them. That was really kind of the issue, and I think they just needed a change of pace because, like we said, they have this old kind of defensive coach who's going against Pat Mahomes, going against Justin Herbert, twice a year. So they're gonna need something kind of similar to them to really succeed in the AFC.
I would definitely see the Broncos being one of the teams to try and make a big splash in free agency to try and get maybe a big quarterback, because you know how weak this quarterback draft class is this season. So maybe if they don't make a big splash, try and get like a 1-year rental on a veteran, just like they did with Teddy Bridgewater this past season, and then hopefully maybe like in 2023 in the next draft.
Still not ready to give up my Drew Lock talk.
Yeah, you are.
We might be closer to that.
The big hype on Drew Lock.
Yeah. And next, another defensive-minded coach, and the first casualty of Black Monday was Mike Zimmer of the Vikings.
Yeah, the most experienced coach as well. Was there for 8 seasons.
Since 2014. And, really no results after 8 seasons, Roach. I mean, maybe a few playoff wins under his belt. But other than that, really, it's time to move on.
Well, that's what we talked about the Vikings every single, week. And it seems like every year they're just that team that before we went to the 17-game season, it's like, all right, they're 8-8. 7-9, 9-7. They had the one season with the Stephon Diggs catch on the sideline against the Saints where they were 13-3, ended up losing to the Eagles in the conference championship. But besides that, just 3 playoff appearances total for Zimmer, and they were just the prototypical average football team. They never really had a great defense. Offense, Kirk Cousins was always up and down. Dalvin Cook was great. They got Justin Jefferson a couple drafts ago, which was a huge steal late in the first round. But they could never put everything together to have one very solid team besides the one season where they went 13-3.
Yeah, like you said, really no results after 8 years, and the longest tenured coach that was fired. The writing was on the wall. People were just tired. A change of pace is required. A change of the guard. And the Vikings do have pieces, with guys like Jefferson, Cook, kind of.
Who knows what's going to happen with Kirk Cousins? He's still got a year or 2 left on his deal. A lot of people are saying he might get traded this offseason, or he might have an opt-out this offseason.
Yeah. Also fired along with Zimmer on the Vikings was Rick Spielman, canned as well. He kind of, his highlights, obviously, Justin Jefferson, Cook, some of the defensive guys, but really the lowlights have been quarterback overall. I mean, Cousins has been serviceable, but he just hasn't been the guy.
I'd say also just on the defensive side, I feel like their secondary has always been very bad. They did get Darisaw in this past draft, so that was a good draft pick for them. But I think it's just something where they just wanted to completely clean house out of there, try and get rid of the mediocre that they've had on their team for the past couple of years, and just see what they can do to try and at least make a better push in the division.
Yeah, I mean, they realize that the Lions in their division should be improved next year. The Packers aren't going anywhere, as of now.
Depending on what Rodgers does
pending Rodgers
offseason.
And then the next team that we're going to talk about is also kind of in line with them. So I think they want to get a leg up on this next team that we're going to talk about. And that, of course, is the Bears. The Bears letting go of Matt Nagy, as well as Ryan Pace. But let's first get into Nagy.
Yeah, once again, kind of like Urban Meyer, he had been our favorite in terms of guys that were going to be canned at some point during the season, or at least by the end of the season.
Yeah.
So they end up letting him go at the end of the season. 34-31 in 4 seasons. Had a great rookie season. He was the coach of the year back in 2018, led the Bears to a 12-4 record, but after that it just went all downhill. As Big Cat would always say, he said the double doink pretty much just
broke his brain.
Absolutely broke Matt Nagy, and like we said, it's just been tough sledding for him.
Yeah, I mean, just an offense that never got out of the water, and a real issue for them is, just Nagy was being stubborn on the play calling. We saw with the Dalton Fields,
I was going to say his belief in Andy
Foles
Dalton
fiasco.
over Justin Fields, and the Nick Foles situation as well. So just everyone wanted Justin Fields to be starting. He finally let him get a shot, and then he went back to Andy Dalton. I mean, Fields was banged up a little bit, but still just continued to show his trust in Andy Dalton, and Andy Dalton wasn't doing anything on the field. So.
Conservative play calling, random draw plays on third and long,
Has continued to have great defenses.
Yeah, defense has not been an issue for the Bears.
But it's just always been the offense for them that they haven't been able to keep up with the defense.
And, we will have a show where we break down all the non-playoff teams, probably closer to the Super Bowl. But, as of now, it's like the Bears have so many issues, especially on their offensive line,
their offensive
receiving
line has been
core.
Bad for years now.
It's just... And the defense can only do so much. Eventually they're going to need some reinforcements.
Allen Robinson's on the franchise tag. He's pretty much had one foot out the door this past season. So
and I was going to say Ryan Pace is pretty much to blame for all these. And I would say the reason they fired him is probably the 2022 draft, because
they don't have their first round pick. They traded up to get
desperately
Justin Fields.
need probably a game changing lineman on the offensive side of the ball, which is available. But unfortunately, the who is it? The Eagles? No.
I don't remember who has their first round pick, but the
Giants.
The Giants have their first round pick. So it was going to be a top 10 pick, and now you do not have that for the upcoming season.
Yeah.
So
and Pace has had just a bad history of overpaying. We saw that for Khalil Mack, who granted has been good, but I mean giving up all those picks to the Raiders, who have actually started to reap some of the benefits.
I mean, look, the Raiders are in the playoffs right now. The Bears aren't. So.
Yeah, exactly, and just questionable. Never able to get any offensive viable weapons. So that was the Bears, Roach.
Yeah, so let's move on to the next guy, and this is probably the most surprising guy, especially from all the Monday firings, and that's Brian Flores for the Dolphins. So 24-25 in 3 seasons, but he'd had a winning record in the past 2 seasons. They were 10-6 last season, 9-8 this past season, but both times they were right on the outside of the bubble of the playoffs, so no playoff appearances for them. And I think the biggest thing to blame was just the start to the season, and they never really recovered after that. So the 1-7 start, then they went on the 7-game win streak. They went above 500, had a chance to make the playoffs, got eliminated in the second to last week of the season.
Yeah, this is a cutthroat AFC East. We've known that for a while, with the Bills resurging and the Patriots kind of claiming their stake as well. So the Dolphins really have had to done a lot to stick out, and not relish with the Jets down there at the bottom.
They've had a decent amount of success, especially in the past couple of seasons against the Patriots as well.
No, they have. Anytime the Patriots go to Miami, the Dolphins seem to have their number. And Flores is one of those guys who came from the Patriots system and has had success, as we've seen. And he's a likable guy. But apparently, what's the stories that have been coming out around this has been there's been very big disagreements between top brass for the Dolphins and Flores, and ultimately the owner, the Glass family, decided to can him because they probably want to install somebody that's probably going to be a yes man for them.
Well, that's what one of the biggest stories that's coming out of this is, because Deshaun Watson, the Dolphins were pretty much the biggest team that was committed to potentially going after him, and Flores was apparently a guy that Deshaun Watson really liked and wouldn't mind having as a head coach. So now some of the stories are saying, as we get to David Culley and the Texans, that Brian Flores is one of the candidates to go over to Houston to be with the Texans and maybe see if Deshaun Watson can end up staying there. So that'll be an interesting story to come around to. But I mean, just the Flores situation, it it's tough because he's had success there, but obviously, like you were saying, they might want someone that kind of falls in line with more the ownership's philosophy.
Yeah, and I guess this is going to be I think this is a move that's ultimately going to hurt the Dolphins long term, especially with Tua still developing, with Waddle having a great year, and that kind of offense starting to get into its own. Defense, I think, has a lot of playmakers as well.
Yeah, defense was very bad to start, then ended up playing very well during that 7-game win streak.
So this is definitely a team that has talent, and it needs to continue to develop. As years past, they've been awful. They've only been improving, I think, overall since a few years ago. And now they're going backwards because they're going to have a whole new regime, and these guys are going to have to learn new regime. When you come into a team, Roach, and you're a coach, and the quarterback there is not your quarterback.
It's tough for a young quarterback who already had question marks going into the season. I mean, Tua, besides Tua and Jalen Hurts were probably two of the starting quarterbacks where it's what is this? This is kind of like a make or break season for him. So there was definitely question marks going in, and now you're gonna have a new coaching staff, maybe some new play calling in there, and it's gonna be tough on a young quarterback that's still trying to kind of get his feet wet in the NFL.
I think this move is just awful for the Dolphins to make, and this is just going to put the Bills and the Patriots at that much better at taking over. I didn't even think the Jets could potentially, if everything goes right for them, I think long term could pass the Dolphins in terms of the AFC East prestige. But let's move on. I might be getting ahead of myself.
It definitely is a juggernaut of a division. So.
Yeah. So besides the Jets, but let's move on to the other New York team, and that is the Giants, who let go of Joe Judge after initially reporting that
he was going to be back for next season. They said him and Daniel Jones were both going to be back, and then he wasn't fired on Monday. I think it went up to Tuesday or Wednesday, and then he ended up getting canned, which the biggest surprise from it was that they said that he was going to come back for 2022.
Yeah, and it was interesting because everyone was looking at the Week 18 performance. There was a very questionable third and long draw play on their own.
Yeah, they ran back-to-back QB sneaks on second down and third down, and I mean it was just it was so bad over the last 4 weeks. After Daniel Jones got hurt, he was out for the season. They had Mike Glennon, Jake Fromm. Yeah. They were outscored 85-20 in those 4 games, or it was something preposterous like that. The offense was just absolutely in shambles. So
they just looked so bad. And, Judge was even saying, he had a media interview where he said, people were calling him to join the team. It's he was trying to save his job.
Yeah, he was pretty much just grasping at straws, trying to say, whatever he could to basically save his job, and it ended up being all for naught in the end. 10-23 in his 2 seasons with the Giants. They were just bad both years. I will say this season they were pretty decimated by injuries in terms of just not having their whole offensive core out there. You had Galladay injured, Slayton, Tony, Sterling Shepard,
Ingram.
Saquon was banged up a little bit. I mean, you never really had your full offensive firepower out there at all. But when it comes down to it, their offensive line was still, and has been for years, just absolutely awful.
Yeah, Rich. And this is definitely the beginning of the end for Daniel Jones. The guy that went to bat for him with Judge after these 2 seasons is gone. I think
this offseason will be whether or not they sign him to or accept his 5th-year option. I would be very surprised if they end up accepting it. I think next year will end up being his last season with the Giants.
Yeah, the experiment has not panned out for them as well. Also, Dave Gettleman, quote unquote, retires more for the Giants. Some more of a probably. The Moras were probably all right, we don't want to fire you, but we want to, so go ahead and just resign with dignity and retire.
Yeah, I mean, the new GM will at least come into a decent situation where the Giants have 2 first-round picks in the top 10.
Yeah, they have
a lot of draft capital.
Yeah, they have a lot of draft capital, some offensive flexibility also with, the guys coming back like Tony, who they hope they can get more out of.
I mean, they could very easily get one of these stud offensive linemen and then one of the stud edge rushers with both of their top 10 picks. So it could at least set them back into the right direction if you can get some of these guys to stay healthy.
And history tells us that the NFC East should be up for grabs next year because there's always a new winner every year, Roach. Nobody ever repeats as an NFC East winner.
There really hasn't been a repeat team in a while, so definitely. But we'll go to the last guy, and this was the news that broke yesterday on Thursday, and that was David Culley. and the Texans parting ways after just one season.
He never had a chance. I don't think. I mean, there was some interesting stuff to come out. Now, you were telling me that the management was never in agreement with Culley.
Yeah, there's apparently some offensive philosophy disagreements between them in terms of some decision making during games.
There was some interesting punting, we will say, in the past, but
I mean,
the team got hotter towards the end.
I was going to say, could you say that he exceeded expectations by getting this Texans team without Deshaun Watson to 4 wins?
Yeah,
I mean, this was probably the team at the beginning of the season that had the least amount of talent on paper.
Yeah, and he made Davis Mills look like a competitive quarterback, who I think Mills has
the starting job for next season.
If Deshaun's not out there, I think Mills could definitely be a backup, if not a rental kind of quarterback for the future, and definitely a capable starter, I would say, with limited weapons that we've seen. So I just think this was kind of a mistake for Culley, but to fire Culley. But maybe they saw Flores getting fired and they said, "Hey, that's our guy." You know?
I mean, there's so many rumblings around. There's all sorts of, if you look at NFL news, there's all sorts of coordinators and defensive coordinators, offensive coordinators that are being asked to get interviewed for different positions. So we're in the very beginning stages of them just going through the interview process of getting pretty much a dozen guys out there just to kind of put their feelers out and see. And now that we're going to start the playoffs, you'll have some of those coordinators aren't able to interview then while they're still in the playoffs. We saw with Eric Bieniemy was probably the hottest head coaching candidate after last season. The Chiefs make it to the Super Bowl. No one can interview him, obviously, because they're still playing. So we'll start to kind of have that happen again in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, so those have been the coaches that have been fired. I think I can only think of maybe 1 or 2 more coaches that could potentially be gone, and I want to say Pete Carroll is probably one of them.
Pete Carroll, Matt Rule is another guy, even though they're kind of like Joe Judge as well, where they're saying that they want Rule back next season. But I'd say those are the 2 biggest hot seat guys that still have their jobs.
If not going into hot seats for next year, or the way too early hot seat for 2022 season. So let's go into the playoff games, Roach. So we finished with the coaches. So let's move on to the teams that actually had success, and we're going to break down every game as we have the first game tomorrow on Saturday at 4:30, and that is going to be between the wild card Raiders and the AFC North divisional winner Bengals. Roach, tell me how the Bengals lose this game, because I don't think there's a chance.
I 100% agree with you, Stein, and we'll just kind of backtrack to the Bengals.
Even though they both have the same record, Yeah,
and the big turnaround that the Bengals had from last season. I mean, 4-11-1 last year. They were projected to finish probably last, if not second to last, in the AFC North this past season. And who thought that just pretty much the addition of Jamar Chase would completely change this offense and this team in general? Because remember, Stein, you go back to the draft last season, you have Joe Burrow goes down with that horrific knee injury, so everyone's like, okay, need to get him some offensive line help and help protect him.
Penei Sewell's right there.
Sewell, like the key number 1, locked in top offensive lineman.
Kind of a I don't know. I don't think he's Hispanic. He's
Hawaiian, Pacific Islander.
Yeah, Pacific Islander. They're like, he's the he reminds people of Anthony Munoz.
Yeah. And so they end up drafting Jamar Chase, obviously the history at LSU with Joe Burrow, and some people kind of question it. And all Jamar Chase does this season, like I said, turn that Bengals offense that was towards last place in terms of points per game, yards, and all that. And he puts up 81 receptions, 1,455 yards, 13 touchdowns. He was 4th in reception yards, 3rd in touchdowns, 3rd in yards after the catch. Just absolutely dynamic, game-changing guy for this offense.
Yeah, and towards the beginning of the season, we saw him maybe once a week have a nice 50, 60-yard 40-yard catch a game, which was awesome. Mm-hmm. But he only got one of those. It was only been more recently down the stretch has he become more of a consistent receiver, I think. And he's catching, maybe 7 or 8 passes a game rather than 3 or 4.
And the big one was a couple weeks ago against the Chiefs when he had the 11 catches, 260 266 yards, 3 touchdowns. Like, that was the game that he broke the rookie record for yards. He broke, like, the rookie record for yards in a game. And that was definitely the peak for him this season, but he has absolutely transformed this offense. Joe Burrow's been back. Joe Mixon, who I think a lot of people forgot, only played in 6 games last season. He was a 1,000-yard rusher this past year. He had that touchdown streak of like 8 or 9 straight games with a touchdown, finished with 16. So just the completely revamped offense with getting some of these guys back and then adding Jamar Chase to the fold with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd.
And I would say Joe Burrow's last little bit of the season had definitely taken the lead by storm. He took kind of average numbers to above average to just next level numbers, almost MVP-esque if there wasn't other guys, and he didn't have as many interceptions. I think he could still cut down on those.
Yeah, I mean, it's between him and Dak Prescott for comeback player of the year, and with the kind of difference in terms of Dak had those couple bad games coming off the calf injury. Joe Burrow, like you said, in those last 3 or 4 games was just absolutely outstanding. I think it's definitely going to be a close race and kind of a toss-up to see who wins that comeback player of the year.
Yeah, Rich. I mean, 4,611 yards, 34 touchdowns. Interceptions are a little weary with 14 on the season, but, I think he's had some unlucky ones, and he's kind of had beginning of the season.
I think the biggest thing is with Jamar Chase, is that he's less conservative. He's willing to take those shots downfield where they may end up in interceptions. You do have those, 50-yard Jamar Chase touchdowns or whatever it may be. So being able to kind of go with the home run ball more, that LSU style of offense when they had all the great receivers there, I think they're definitely kind of opening up the playbook for Burrow and having just another season back in the NFL.
Yeah, and he's also got another complement of receivers with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd to complement, Jamar. So when their best cover corner is on Jamar or T. Higgins, this opens the door for the other guys. Also with C.J. Uzama, who played pretty well this season at tight end for them. Also, credit to their defense as well. Trey Hendrickson has been a beast for them.
Yeah, that was a huge signing. He had that consecutive games with at least 1 sack. I think he tied the record.
Yeah, they are ranked currently 5th in rush yards per game out of 29th last season. So that is a huge improvement for them.
Yeah, not only the offense, the defense really improved for them this season. And going into now kind of the injuries for this game, they should have their full plethora, their full arsenal of players back. Burrow, Mixon, T. Higgins, etc. All those guys were a little bit banged up. Sat out their Week 18 game.
They played the Browns, and they were kind of already put in and set in stone in their spots. So
I think
really
Jamar Chase maybe played the first quarter, and that was it.
They just let their starters get some rest for their game against the Raiders, who had a very different road than the Bengals. The Bengals, a great story, where the Raiders kind of just fighting to hang on throughout so many different distractions throughout the season, Roach. We're talking, DUIs, we're talking coaches, we're talking, just suspensions, just so much craziness.
Yeah, we already brought up Gruden with him resigning after Week 5 when they were 3-2, and then you had the DUI with Henry Ruggs.
There was another DUI with another guy, corner for them.
With the major car accident. So he was released after Week 7 when they had a 5-2 record. Then after that, they lost 5 out of their last 6 to go 6-7. Their playoff hopes were pretty bleak, and then they won their last 4 games all by 4 points or less to end up finishing with 10-7 record and making it into the playoffs. And it went all the way down, like we said, to the last game, to overtime, where the game almost ended in a tie where both teams would have made it into the playoffs. But Brandon Staley for the Chargers calls a timeout. They end up changing their philosophy. Instead of taking a knee, going for the tie, they end up running a couple offensive plays and sets up a game-winning Daniel Carlson field goal.
Don't worry, we'll get to the Colts and the Chargers when in our recap show closer to the Super Bowl. But those guys are not going to miss getting their lumps, because both of them just completely choked. But anyways, the Raiders have really been playing inspiring football towards the end. And the guy that you really want to point out, Roach, I know, is Hunter Renfrow. I know how much you love him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of him, but he has been pretty much the glue for this offense this season. When they lost Henry Ruggs, who was kind of their leading receiver, Darren Waller missed a couple of games in the back half of the season due to injury, so Renfrow was a guy consistently in the lineup and Derek Carr's favorite target. He had 103 catches, 1,038 yards and 9 touchdowns. It pretty much doubles all of his career highs in terms of his previous career highs with receptions, yards, and touchdowns. He was absolutely great for them this past season, and like I said, really what they needed when some of their other playmakers were out of the lineup.
Yeah, and just looking really good there. And you got to give credit to Carr as well. I don't think, the guy continues to just be just goes under the radar. No one really gives him enough credit.
When they started 3-0, he had the 3 amazing games, and he kind of fell off during their big losing streak. But he's not a game-changing quarterback, but he's at least steady and will put up numbers for you that keeps you in ball games.
Yeah, I think you could maybe put him a hair below Stafford or something in terms of talent wise. But let's move on with Darren Waller and Josh Jacobs. They were both limited in practice, and they were kind of both limited all year, but they're both expected to play.
Yeah, and then I saw a report a little bit ago that said both of them are going to play in this game, so they'll at least be closer back to their full arsenal of weapons. Josh Jacobs had a couple nice games in the past couple weeks when they were making that playoff push, so definitely big to have him back. And then Waller, of course, a game-changing tight end, so great to have both those guys in the lineup for you against this very offensive threatening team in the Bengals. So.
Yeah. Roach, let's talk about this game. I think they played only once before this season. Bengals won 32-13 in a Week 11 matchup. Joe Mixon had 123 yards and 2 touchdowns. Personally, I see the Bengals kind of doing a similar thing. I don't think it's as wide as the margin was, but I still see maybe a 24 to 10, 24 to 15 kind of game. Something weird that.
That's what I just think the Bengals offense is just way too much for the Raiders. Just offensively for them to keep up, and then defensively to stop them.
Yeah.
I just don't think that if this game gets into a shootout, then I just don't think the Raiders are going to be able to keep up points wise. And like I said, the Raiders defense just isn't good enough to stop this Bengals offense.
Yeah, also this will be the first playoff game for the Bengals in a while, home playoff game for them as well. So, you got to expect the Bengals always have a good following, a good fan base. They should be out there full force and making the jungle really loud for the Raiders, and it's going to be tough there.
Yeah, they haven't won a playoff game since 1991, Stein. So they're definitely
they got that. Taylor's trying to change things up, and I think he has a really good shot to in this game to really also change the history.
I think he's got a chance at Coach of the Year as well. I mean, there's a lot of guys in that conversation, but he's definitely one of them.
Oh, real quick, because we're only covering the wild card teams. We'll give a shout out to the Titans and the
Titans
Packers.
And Packers
they aren't
the
playing.
1 seeds.
Yeah, they will not be playing this weekend. Basically, Packers, what did we expect? Offense led by Aaron Rodgers and Devontae, good running backs, good everything. Defense is coming into their own. What do we expect there? But then the Titans,
probably the most underrated number 1 seed.
Probably the worst 1 seed we've had in a while. It's not they're not definitively good. You know?
They lost pretty much every one of their offensive weapons at some point this season. Derrick Henry missed the whole back half of the season. Yeah. The defense was absolutely awful the first month of the year, and then they kind of carried them through the rest of this season. Deonta Foreman was great at the running back position while Derrick Henry was out, so they were just able to find a way to win these ball games and stay in that top position. And they really needed this bye to give Derrick Henry an extra week to get back and get healthy.
Yeah, so shout out to those 2 teams. We'll see them next week. But let's go to the only other Saturday game, and that is the nightcap of a AFC East rivalry. The Patriots traveling up to Buffalo to take on the Bills in Orchard Park, Roach, and this one is going to be a slugfest between these 2 guys.
Yeah, the weather conditions aren't projected to be as bad as that windy game that they had.
Hell, we might have worse weather here in Atlanta.
Back in Week 13, but it is supposed to be very cold there. Apparently under 10, single digits, under 10 degrees, a little bit of a wind chill as well, so very similar to that Green Bay game a couple weeks ago.
A slow-mo cam of the air coming out. You gotta love those when they cut to commercial or something.
Yeah, you're gonna have that in this ball game. Maybe a little bit of a dusting of snow as well. Yeah. I mean, Saturday night, of course, it's gonna be nighttime.
Showing some Buffalo fans in the parking lot.
Yeah, shirtless.
Yeah, breaking tables without shirts. It's gonna be awesome. Tables on fire at that.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a crazy game outside and then crazy in the actual game itself. So the Bills winning the AFC East Division for the second straight season. It's the first time that they've won back-to-back division titles since back in the late 80s and early 90s when they won a couple Super Bowls.
Went to a couple Super Bowls, you mean?
Yeah, went to a couple Super Bowls, sorry.
Yeah, they did not win any of those, but...
And they have shown some weaknesses this season, though. They did win 4 straight at the end of the season to end up locking up that division title. But remember, they had the
Jacksonville.
Week 1. Yeah, they had the Jacksonville loss. They had the Week 1 loss to the Steelers, which we didn't think the Steelers would end up being in the playoffs at this point. And then they also got blown out by the Colts in Week 11, which the Colts now obviously not a playoff team. So they have
and in that embarrassing performance against the Patriots too.
Yeah, so they have kind of stumbled at points this season. There was a couple of times when they were the last wild card spot. We were wondering if they were going to end up making it in. But they end up winning the division, and they still have the MVP talent of Josh Allen, who put up MVP-type numbers once again with 4,400 pass yards, 36 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, and then also doing it with his legs. He had 73 rush yards, which is a career 763 rush yards, which is a career high for him, and also 6 rushing touchdowns. I think he was third among quarterbacks in rushing yards behind Lamar and Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, not as great of numbers in terms of passing as last year, but the rushing numbers were definitely there, Roach. I think if he had better passing numbers, he could also be in the conversation for MVP. But really, towards the end of the season, give credit to them because they've kind of started leaning up on their run game with Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, especially Singletary in particular. 86-plus rush yards in 3 of the last 4 games. Also, a lot of touchdowns. We saw them smoke the Falcons in that. So, really starting to develop their run game as really we saw them try to pass the ball a lot at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and we've always talked about the Bills, like even at the end of last season when they lost to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship, their biggest thing has always been, can they build a consistent run game? They've got the defense, they've got a great offensive line, they've got Josh Allen, just a gunslinger at quarterback, Stephon Diggs, and all the wide receivers they've got, but they've never had a consistent run game outside of Josh Allen. So if Devin Singletary can continue this type of production, they finally kind of leaned on him as almost their like workhorse running back, the running back one, not using really a committee anymore. So if they're able to use kind of that and then the dual threat ability of Josh Allen, that's going to be a scary team to face in the playoffs. So
most definitely.
So if they're able to figure that out and find some success against this Patriots defense with that run game as well, it's definitely going to keep them on their toes and open up some play action.
Yeah, they also are going to get Emmanuel Sanders back after missing the last 2 weeks, kind of joining Diggs and Beasley in a crowded receiving room. That's going to be a lot of mouths to feed, but that's an offense that when it's fully healthy and everything's clicking, can beat any team in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, they're 3rd in points per game this season, 5th in yards per game, and then that's not even talking about their elite defense that was the best in the league in terms of points allowed and yards allowed, and then they were also 3rd in takeaways, so just a game-changing defense.
I will say the loss of Tre'Davious White, Roach, is definitely a big missing piece for them. Even though the defense is still humming along, I think if they have Tre'Davious White, it puts them over the top. And that's why I think overall, it's going to be a little bit harder of a road than we could expect.
Yeah, especially if they're fortunate enough to move on and when they face some of these teams with great wide receivers, when you talk about like the Bengals and the Chiefs and all of that. The one benefit for them is when we talk about this Patriots team is they really lack a true wide receiver one or a true number one pass catcher on their team.
Yeah, so for the Patriots, pretty much back in the playoffs after a year hiatus with the Cam Newton experience, this time under the tutelage of Mac Jones, who has been more of a game manager, but this is kind of the role we expected, especially in this this Bill Belichick-style offense. Really, he was pretty much the best rookie quarterback, you could say, probably because of his team's success. Yeah. But even his numbers have been decent.
I would say he went to the most successful team in the draft anyway when they got him at 15th overall. But yeah, 22 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, so nothing crazy, but good
definitely
enough
best of the rookies we've seen.
Yeah, good enough to keep them in ball games. And this was a Patriots team that started the season 2-4. They had that big 7-game win streak in the middle of the season. They were the 1 seed for a couple weeks.
Yeah, they were playing really hot. They destroyed the Falcons.
But they're kind of limping into the playoffs now. They've lost 3 out of their last 4. Their only win being that slugging of the Jaguars in Week 17 of the season, 50-10. So they're definitely going to need to step up against this Bills team that, they beat them under the crazy circumstances back in Week 13, But in Week 16, when there was maybe more normal weather conditions, the Bills ended up getting the victory 33-21.
Yeah, so definitely both teams have split. There's not been one team that's won each matchup, so anything could happen in this matchup. We can see that, Roach. And let's talk about the Patriots offense. Like you said earlier, they really lack a true leading receiver. It's kind of a mixture of Jacoby Myers, Kendrick Bourne, and then
Hunter Henry
who's been playing better than he was, I would say, in San Diego or L.A. And then the run game has actually, we've seen running back by committee for a lot of them, but Damian Harris has stepped up and turned into their lead back.
Yeah, and he's just been a touchdown machine down the stretch, even though they maybe didn't get some wins. He had a couple 3-touchdown games, but 15 total on the season, which was tied for second in the league. He was almost a 1,000-yard rusher, which I didn't realize. Yeah. 929 yards, because it seemed like he was just banged up at every point in the season where he was questionable or missed a game or something like that. Yeah. And then, of course, in Belichick's offense, they got a bunch of serviceable running backs behind him. Ramondre Stevenson, the rookie, has filled in nicely when Harris has been out. And then Brandon Bolden, as a pass-catching back, has even had a couple nice games as well. So they're definitely going to rotate in and out their running backs, but Damian Harris is definitely their number one guy, especially on first and second down.
Yeah. Also, on the other side of the ball, their defense has been great. They're second in points per game, fourth in yards per game given up. So they really have some playmakers on there. We've seen, it's just kind of like a who's who of...
J.C. Jackson has definitely been the big guy in the secondary for them. Matthew Judon has been great up
front. Kyle Duggar.
So they've got a bunch of great options to really stack up against this Bills.
Linebacker core has always been good under any kind of Belichick team. So definitely a team that I would say is more defensive heavy compared to their offense.
This is kind of similar to the Bengals Raiders, where they don't want to get into a slugfest of the 33-21 that they had Week 16. They'd rather have that 14-10, like Mac Jones 19 passing yards type game
two
that
they
had. They would much rather have that type of defensive style, low scoring game, because that's the type of game that they're going to win. So,
but for a Patriots team that's always been known for defenses, usually their offense is starting to come into their own with 6 points per game and 8th in rush, and give credit to mostly Damian Harris for that. So for this game, Damian and Jacoby Myers are both listed as questionable, but should be ready to go. It is a night game. They will have the day to get ready, and they are probably going to be playing. So we're really going to see both teams going at it full strength, pretty much, and it's going to be a cold, like you said.
Yeah, cold temperatures, single digits. So this is two teams' bitter rivalry, pretty much, with the divisional. They meet each other twice a year. The Bills are trying to take over and finally take down the big dog in terms of the Patriots and all the success they had with Brady.
Yeah.
I think because of all the conditions and stuff, this is probably going to be a game that comes down to the final quarter, maybe even the final possession. But I just think this Bills offense, when you stack up their defense, I think they're very similar. But when you look at the offense, the Bills offense definitely trumps that Patriots offense, even with Belichick and all the experience coaching in the playoffs. I'm going with McDermott and the Bills to win this ball game.
And I do think the Patriots are going to play to their strengths. They always do that. And I don't think they're going to be, you can never count them out, Roach. You can never count them out, even on paper. But I do think their offense is not good enough to get past this Bills defense, and I think the Bills offense will ultimately prevail even against the strong Pats defense. So that's why we both have the Bills taking it, and it should be a fun game to watch.
I was going to say, that's probably going to be one of the most exciting games of the weekend. You always love whenever you get the divisional opponents matching up in the wild card round.
Yes. So let's move on to Sunday. We have 3 games in the Sunday slate, and the first one is the 1 o'clock, in which basically turns into a 1 versus 16 college basketball matchup, as we have the second-seeded Buccaneers finishing with a 13-4, taking on the 7th-ranked Eagles with a 9-8 record. So this is kind of David versus Goliath for the Eagles, Roach.
Yeah, the Bucs are 8.5-point favorite at home in this ball game, and definitely a heavy favorite in this one. The Bucs, this is their first division title since 2007. Remember last year when they won the Super Bowl? They were a wild card team, had to take down the Saints later on, as the Saints were the team that won the division. And they're seeking to become the first team to win back-to-back Super Bowls since the Brady-led 04-05 Patriots. So something that we haven't seen in over 15 years. They're obviously got Tom Brady at the helm, the guy that between him and Aaron Rodgers are probably fighting for the MVP conversation.
Yep.
He had 5,316 pass yards, 43 touchdowns. Both of those led the league in just 12 interceptions. But they are kind of limping into the playoffs, not in terms of just like wins and losses, but in terms of injuries, because they have had them piling up, especially on the offensive end, to their wide receiver core.
Yeah, definitely, Roach. And we've seen Chris Godwin out for the rest of the season. Cyril Grayson out. Brashad Perryman has been limited, and then the big
Everyone
one.
knows what happened with AB
the
up
head
in
case
New York.
of Antonio Brown versus the Jets. We'll probably do that we'll probably talk about all that at the end after the Super Bowl, Roach. We can kind of recap the playoff teams.
Yeah.
But I just really
Everyone knows what happened.
Yeah, we don't have enough time
like...
to get into that right now. So, despite all those guys being not able to catch passes, they still have Mike Evans to catch passes, who's been good.
He kept up his 1,000-yard
and
in a season streak. Yeah, Gronk has been great for them.
Tyler Johnson is an option, as well as Scotty Miller, but those guys I don't think are going to win you by themselves a Super Bowl, Roach.
Yeah, I mean, their starting wide receiver core is looking like Mike Evans, Tyler Johnson, and Scotty Miller right now with Rob Gronkowski. You are going to get Leonard Fournette back. Remember, he missed the past couple weeks with a hamstring injury. Playoff Lenny's coming back right at the right time. He had 10 touchdowns during the regular season, 69 receptions. So he really became, remember, everyone was like, oh, they don't, like between Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette, neither of these guys can catch passes. Leonard Fournette was third on the team in terms of targets and catches this past season behind Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So he's really shown to be that safety valve for Tom Brady in this offense.
Yeah, despite Brady not having Godwin or Antonio Brown, he still has Evans as well as Gronk, but also, like you said, playoff Lenny. And then another X factor, I think, is Giovanni Bernard as a pass catcher as well.
Yeah, so he had been injured the past couple weeks. He's returning also. They're not going to have Ronald Jones. He's doubtful.
Yeah, but he's probably their worst pass catching back.
Yeah,
Keyshawn Vaughn will probably step up in that third running back role.
When Leonard Fournette was fully healthy, Ronald Jones was getting maybe like 1 or 2 touches a ball game, so I don't think he would have factored in much even if he was active in this ball game. And we just talked about the elite offense that they've had, second in points per game and yards per game, and then first in pass yards per game. Obviously leaning on Brady's arm and dumping it off to guys like Leonard Fournette as their quote-unquote run game. Yeah. And then the defense, everyone knows, don't run on the Bucs defense. If you want to have success against them, you're going to have to pass the football, and that plays right into the Eagles' weaknesses in terms of they've been one of the best running teams this season, and Jalen Hurts hasn't really had to throw the ball a whole lot.
Yeah, that's not a great matchup for them because the Eagles' strength has been running the ball, whether with their running backs or with Jalen himself with his legs.
Yeah, they're the number one rushing attack so far this season. Jalen Hurts was the best rushing quarterback this season at 784 rush yards and then also 10 touchdowns. He only passed for a little over 3,000 yards, 16 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. So, yeah, they've definitely been leaning. The turnaround for the Eagles this season was when they started committing fully to the run game. When you talk about Miles Sanders, Kenneth Gainwell, Jordan Howard joined the team and ended up doing great. Boston Scott. I mean, they had all sorts of guys rotating in and out because of injuries, and they were all doing good for them. That they fell to 5-7 at
Kenny
one point
Gainwell,
this season.
Too. Yep.
After they lost to the Giants, and then they started committing to a rushing attack, and that's what led them to this playoff appearance.
Yeah. And the Eagles, back in the playoffs after similar to the Patriots with a 1-year hiatus, trying to look for their first playoff win since the Super Bowl, Roach. And really for them, it's Nick Sirianni taking over after Doug Peterson, who Nick Sirianni has the best record of all the rookie head coaches between him, Arthur Smith, obviously David Culley, and Urban Meyer, those kind of guys. So he's kind of looked at the most successful, but his team has been playing well overall. And really, Jalen Hurts has quietly turned himself into a guy that they can build on for the future.
Well, let's remember there were the big question marks going into this season. It's like, is Jalen Hurts like a franchise quarterback?
Yeah, is he the guy?
And I mean, I don't know, Stein. I feel like even with them making the playoffs and everything, I think there still might be question marks about whether or not he's going to be the full future. Obviously, they still have a couple more years on his rookie contract, but it'll be interesting to see, like, once it comes to like 5th-year option time, whether they pick it up and if they want to try and sign him to a extension. I think it's kind of similar to like a Baker Mayfield situation where the team has obviously been good, but is it going to lead to like greater success?
Yeah, no, definitely you're definitely they're definitely in a hot spot right now in terms of having veteran talent combined with a young infusion, and that's definitely where teams love to be, like where the kind of Browns were. Mm-hmm. So this could just be just mild success for now, but ride the hot hand, ride Hurts for all he's worth, and they did limp into the playoffs though. We can't give them like that game against the Dallas, even though they were starting Minshew. Mm-hmm. They were embarrassing in that game, Roach.
Yeah, they're going to need the pass catchers to step up. Devontae Smith, the rookie, at 916 yards, 5 touchdowns this season. Dallas Goedert, 830 yards, 4 touchdowns. Both those guys are going to need to step up against this Bucs weak secondary. Yeah. Remember, this is a team that traded away Zach Ertz like midway through the season over to the Cardinals.
But Goddard has filled in nicely. I think he's definitely the number 1 tight end going forward for them. And also shout out to Smith for a team that's had such bad success or such lack of success with wide receivers.
Yeah, just drafting like terrible wide receivers. Yeah, they finally Ortega-Whiteside, Nelson Aguilar
took a step in the right, and Jalen Reagor too. Mm-hmm. They finally took a step in the right direction by having Devontae Smith. Though his numbers are not as good as a guy like Chase or even Waddle, I'm pretty sure not the same. But Smith has definitely been one of the better rookie receivers. So kind of about this team, number 1 rushing attack, we've already talked about that. A good but not elite defense. Still have some guys like Fletcher Cox and those kind of,
Yeah, they're more like just on the outside of the top 10 in terms of like the rushing allowed, yards per game allowed, all that. So it's definitely going to be a tough test for them against this stout Bucs offense. Big injury question for them going into this game. Miles Sanders broke his hand a couple weeks ago. He's been limited in practice this week. They're saying he's probably on the optimistic side of questionable. We've seen guys like Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell, Jordan Howard, other guys that we mentioned in this rushing attack have stepped up when guys like Miles Sanders have been in and out of the lineup this season. So while it would be great to have him back, I think they'll still be at least okay with some of the replacements that they have, even if he's not able to go.
Yeah. And let's get into this. The previous matchup was the Bucs playing against them in Week 6. It was 28-22. Bucs win, and the guys who had big games were Leonard Fournette and Antonio Brown.
Who is no longer with the team.
One of those guys is no longer with the team. The other guy is a little bit shaken up. So that does give the Eagles a little bit of solace. But, Roach, I think when it's all said and done, I think the Eagles' bread and butter is running, and I think the Buccaneers' bread and butter is stopping the run.
Yeah, so one of them's got to give, and that's what I said. The Bucs injuries, I think, will keep the Eagles in this ball game with the depleted receiving core. Some guys coming off of injury on offense and defense, but overall, the rush offense can't get through the Bucs' rush defense, and I think the Bucs will end up winning this ball game probably by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, easily. Like I said, this game has really turned into like the 1v16 battle in college basketball. To the next game, the 4:30 game, Roach, the Nickelodeon game last year.
Yeah, we saw back to the second season.
Bears, and we saw Mitch Trubisky win the MVP. This year, it is 2 historical teams, a very historical matchup between the Niners going to Jerry's World in Dallas. And you got to think, like, do you think Jerry Jones, you think he wanted his crew? I mean, I know they're going to have an adult broadcast too, but do you think they wanted his crew, Troy and Joe? I'm sure I think they're probably doing it on Fox.
Yeah, no, I was very surprised that they were that the Cowboys would be in this ball game, because I thought Jerry Jones wouldn't want to be associated with the children's ball game.
What's better way to make Cowboys fans than make children's Cowboys fans?
Got to start them early. Yeah. So, but yes, this will be the Nickelodeon game. I know we'll be watching the game on Nickelodeon. It was enjoyable last year.
Yeah, no young Sheldon. I hope for no young Sheldon. I liked the slime time.
Yeah, the little SpongeBob face in the goal post. They had all sorts of gimmicks and everything.
I think I've heard Kittle as the early MVP favorite.
I said Micah Parsons maybe. It doesn't have to be from the winning team. It's like a fan vote, because remember Trubisky won it last year. Yeah, they lost 23-3.
Everyone was making it a joke, and I think we should have. I don't know who's going to be MVP. We're going to have somebody that there's going to be funny.
Kittle would be he's got the right personality to that would take the MVP whether they win or lose anyway. So yeah, that would be a great choice.
So this matchup, you're seeing the Niners, who have been really hot coming in. Everyone's saying the Niners are a team no one wants to face, against the Cowboys, who have had some very awesome wins, but then some very questionable losses.
Yeah, and the Cowboys, this is their first division title since 2018. They're looking for their first playoff win since that year as well. Yeah. And, I mean, the biggest thing for them was the return of Dak Prescott. They finished 6-10 last year because Dak had the really bad ankle injury, so you had the rotation of Andy Dalton and others. And at quarterback, like I said, Dak and Joe Burrow, it's going to be like 1-2 in terms of comeback player of the year. But he had almost 4,500 passing yards, 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and he really spread the ball around. 3 different guys had over 800 receiving yards between CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Dalton Schultz, and then 4 different guys with 6 or more touchdowns.
All I've heard on any media roach, and that's mostly ESPN media, is Dak hasn't been the guy this season. Dak hasn't been 100%. It's like, but look at his numbers. He's been doing great. I don't know what.
Like I said,
how much more do they want in Dallas?
The big question was after the calf injury, he kind of had some down games where they were still winning because they have a much improved defense from last season, but he wasn't putting up amazing numbers. He had a game here or there towards the end of the season, but I think that's really the big question is like what. Really, both quarterbacks in this game, between Jimmy G, who's dealing with a thumb injury, and then Dak, who's kind of battled some inefficiency this season. It's like, what version of these quarterbacks are you going to get? Because if you get a bad version of Dak, this is a very losable game for this Cowboys team.
Yeah, this is definitely a trap game against a hot Niners team and a overconfident Cowboys team.
Yeah, I mean, but going on to the defensive side of the football, we've mentioned it all year. Dan Quinn, becoming the defensive coordinator, has vastly improved this defensive front with the addition of Micah Parsons in this draft. Trevon Diggs, all the interceptions that he's had.
Has given up a lot of receiving
yards.
Yeah,
he has given up a lot of yards.
I know the interceptions look sexy, but...
This team was first in takeaways this season. They were 7th in points per game allowed after being 28th last season as a defense. So Dan Quinn has definitely improved them. They've gotten some help on the defensive front between DeMarcus,
Randy Gregory.
Yeah, between Lawrence as well. So they've had all sorts of guys that when they're fully healthy, they're one of the scariest defenses in the league.
Yeah, and when everything comes together, Dallas can be worked. But I think it's just, for me, it's just like there's too much like things going right for them that something's got to go wrong, and it's going to be funny because every single Cowboys fan is riding some high right now, you know, and we don't want to see the Cowboys win the Super Bowl because you think the Dallas fans are annoying now.
Well, they had the loss to Arizona in Week 17. That was kind of like their playoff preview matchup. Yeah. Arizona, obviously another team that's in the playoffs that we'll get to with the Monday night game, and they ended up losing that one. So, and this was an Arizona team that kind of been struggling in the back half of the season.
They had that questionable loss against the Raiders too on Thanksgiving, Roach, and they're definitely a team that has looked bad in the games they've lost, but the games they've won, they usually have looked very good. Going to get like the Falcons, their game against the Giants and the Washington football team.
Yeah, Washington football team guys were literally fighting each other because they were getting beat so bad.
Yeah, that was a massacre.
Pretty much the only injury on the Dallas side is Tony Pollard's been playing through a foot injury for about the past month. He should be out there again this week. He's formed a nice 1-2 punch with Zeke. Both of them have had over 1,000 scrimmage yards this season. Zeke's pretty much the one with the touchdowns, and then Tony Pollard's kind of like your change of pace back and also coming on third down.
They will be missing Michael Gallup, though, as he is out for the rest of the year on the receiving side, but I think they still have...
Cedric Wilson has stepped up, and he's one of those guys that had 6 or more touchdowns this season, so he's filled in nicely. They have a very deep receiving core.
Yeah, probably got himself a contract or something next year. For the Niners, back in the playoffs again after a 1-year hiatus.
Yeah, remember the Niners were pretty much the Ravens.
After the Super Bowl appearance for them. Off year last year, come in this year though, and just come in red hot. 7-2 in the final 9 games, including a win against the Falcons after a 3-4 start. And it's just been credit to that offense who's starting to come into its own, even with, I would say, Jimmy G not being like super reliable.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone thought that Trey Lance drafted 3rd overall for the 49ers. We didn't know if it was going to be Lance, Justin Fields, like who might be drafted 3rd overall. Yeah. They go with Trey Lance, and I was and still is a big believer in Trey Lance and thought that he would end up being the starter about midway through the season. But Jimmy G has like played well enough and had like one good game sprinkled in like every few games to just like keep his starting job when he's been healthy. Lance only made 2 starts this season, and they were both when Jimmy G was hurt.
Yeah.
So Jimmy G, 3,800 pass yards, 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Not flashy numbers like the touchdown interceptions. That's worse than Mac Jones when you look at those numbers. But like I said, he's just had good enough games when needed to keep that starting job. And he really doesn't have to be the guy because, Kyle Shanahan and in his offense, they'll find any sort of running back to end up being successful.
Yeah, Roach. And for this offense, it's kind of funny because the guys that they brought in were kind of expected to be, whether it be Sermon or Lance, have been replaced by guys that have been there with Elijah Mitchell, who's also was kind of more not expected because he was picked later.
Elijah Mitchell was a 6th-round draft pick compared to Trey Sermon, who was a 3rd-round draft pick.
And Jimmy Garoppolo, who everyone thinks they're going to get rid of. So, they have guys who are stepping up. Also, Deebo Samuel has really filled in as a Swiss Army knife.
I was going to say, he became Cordarrelle Patterson right as Cordarrelle Patterson became cool.
Yeah.
He had all those rushing touchdowns. He has 8 rushing touchdowns on the season. He was a 1,400-yard receiver, and then he also had a touchdown pass in one of their last games of the season.
Also 6 touchdown catches.
So showed himself as a true Swiss Army knife, and now just like another wrinkle in this Kyle Shanahan offense that teams have to deal with.
Yeah, and they got Brandon Ayuk and Juwan Jennings, who's had some good times this year.
And don't forget about George Kittle.
Yeah, and of course George Kittle. So they have a lot of things that can go right, and a defense and an offensive line that are both, I would say, above average.
Yeah, and talking about injuries going into this game, Trent Williams, one of their great offensive linemen, Jimmy G, and then Elijah Mitchell are all banged up, but all expected to play in this ball game. We just saw Elijah Mitchell and Jimmy G come back in their Week 18 matchup. Trent Williams has been on the shelf the past couple weeks, but they're saying he's expected to be back, which would be a big boost for their offense in general.
Yeah. Bottom line from this game, this is definitely the game with the biggest chance at an upset. We've said that the Cowboys may be too confident, and also we forget it's Mike McCarthy coaching the Cowboys, and we know how he's been in the playoffs.
I think Mike McCarthy versus Kyle Shanahan. I think I would give the coaching advantage to Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, so this definitely has the best chance for an upset. There could be some San Fran magic as we've seen it in the past.
Like I said, I think it all comes down to quarterback performance. I think Jimmy G's performance will make or break this game for San Fran, and then you could say the same thing for Dak Prescott. If he ends up having one of those really bad games, if he has just like a costly turnover that he's had in some of these ball games where they've been up big to let other teams back in, that you can't do that in the playoffs.
Yeah, this could be a really pretty uniform matchup too. I mean, you look at those whites for Dallas.
The 49ers have one of my favorite uniforms where they have like the black outlines in their numbers.
Yeah, so that's going to be a fun game to look, and it's the Nickelodeon game as well. So just watch the Nickelodeon broadcast.
At least for a drive or two,
yeah, maybe a quarter if you're really wild. But we'll probably watch the whole thing like that. Moving on to the nightcap of Sunday, and it is the AFC nightcap. The Steelers going to Arrowhead to take on the Chiefs, and this is the biggest line of the weekend with a 12.5-point favorite towards the Chiefs. It's looking like that, Roach.
Yeah, I mean these are two teams that face off against each other. Back in Week 16, the Chiefs won 36-10. I wouldn't be surprised if there's another.
That was the bad Chiefs.
That was no Travis Kelce. Tyreek Hill only had 2 receptions. So just imagine now that the Chiefs are back at full strength. But I mean, everyone knows this is a Steelers team that is lucky to be in the playoffs right now.
Yeah,
with having the
all
Colts,
respect, should not have been in there.
Yeah, having the Colts lose their ball game, the Steelers went to overtime in theirs. It almost ended in a tie and would have eliminated them and the Ravens. They ended up winning very late in the ball game.
This team tied the Lions.
It was a team with less than a 10% chance to make it into the playoffs going into Week 18, and they ended up making it in, having all those things go right.
So they barely just get under the sliding, the door that's coming down really slowly. They grab their hat like Indiana Jones, and as soon as they get up, dust themselves off, they look, and they have a big ass boulder about to crush them, and that boulder
the Kansas
is the
City
Chiefs
and Andy Reid.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about the Chiefs first. Their 6th straight division title. They're seeking their 3rd straight Super Bowl appearance, obviously winning 2 years ago and then losing to the Bucs last season. And I don't know if you remember, Stein, but remember this Chiefs team, it was a 3-4 start to the season. There was a big.
That's what I said. The Steelers played the Chiefs when the Chiefs were bad.
Yeah, there was big question marks about are they actually gonna make the playoffs? They were last in their division, like every other team in their division was good.
Yeah, the defense was looking garbage.
Yeah, and then they end up flipping the script. They win 9 of the last 10 games. The defense really stepped up and won them a lot of games in the middle of the season. And then the offense adapted to, instead of having this home run approach, like 75-yard touchdown to Tyreek Hill every time, they started to get into more of the quick passing game, just getting it to Tyreek Hill out in space and letting him like soak up yards after the catch. Tyreek Hill had 111 receptions this past season. I think his previous career high was last season at like 87. So it just shows how like the average depth of targets kind of sucked in. They're just taking what the defense is giving them.
And then, of course, Kelsey continues to dominate, 92 catches, which obviously led all tight ends 1,125 yards and 9 TDs. Just continues to be that 1A like tight end in the NFL. Just, of course, obviously combined with Patrick Mahomes, who had another almost 5,000-yard season, 37 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. Did have 10 interceptions of those in the first 8 games. So if you really
he's cut that down, 3 interceptions in the last 9 games, he's really been, because I remember he was one of the leaders in interceptions at the start of the season. Not a lot of them were his fault. It was a lot of like tip passes and everything, but he was up there with like Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence leading the league in interceptions through the first 8 games of the season.
Yeah, has really settled down and just they've been quietly dominating everything they've done. I will say their defense though has, as hot as it got, it's starting to show a little bit of cracks again. Roach.
Their defense plays bad against good quarterbacks. Who would have thought that would happen? But that's.
I really look at the Bengals game as the biggest microcosm of that.
If you look at the games that they won and the defense was playing well, they were playing the Teddy Bridgewaters, the Drew Locks, like Derek Carrs. I'm trying to think of some.
Come on, you got to give Carr a little credit. They're playing the Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, the teams that they were playing like didn't have good quarterbacks. So when you faced a quarterback like Joe Burrow, that's the game where Jamar had the 266 yards. Joe had 500 something pass yards.
Yeah.
So obviously facing Big Ben in this ball game, you shouldn't have that big of a problem. He was awful in their previous matchup a couple weeks ago, but as they get later into these playoffs, when you face Joe Burrow again, when you face Josh Allen,
and then you could potentially face Tom Brady.
Yeah, so when you talk about these great quarterbacks, this defense could just result back to how they were playing in the first month of the season. So that's definitely going to be something that needs to step up for them. The offense, like I said, has adapted. They found ways to make it work, even though they're not having as many home run shots as before.
Yeah.
But they're definitely going to need the consistent play from the defense and them to continue what they did in the middle of the season to get them back in this.
Yeah, and I really like their running backs, even though it has been questionable. I love Clyde Edwards-Helaire, obviously being that LSU guy, and Darrell Williams has also been decent as well.
Yeah, they're both banged up right now. Clyde obviously missed the last couple games with a shoulder injury. He's more questionable to play than to not play than Darrell in this ball game, but I think they'd be fine. In terms of the talent and production they brought this season, they pretty much had about the same production. You could even argue Darrell Williams has been better than Clyde at times this season.
Yeah, that is true. And for their team they'll be facing is the Pittsburgh Steelers, who traveled to Arrowhead and pretty much could be Ben Roethlisberger's last official start. He definitely will not have a home start because they are the 7th seed. So
unless if they make it all the way to Super Bowl, it's in Indy.
Exactly, no, it's in LA. You're thinking of college football, which shout out to the Georgia Dogs. I know me and Roach love the Bulldogs.
Yeah, put love in quotes, but...
but shout out to everyone who's a fan of them. They finally got their World Series.
All right, we're combining all the sports today.
Yeah, they finally got their World Championships. When
they get a Stanley Cup.
Yeah. Joining the Braves and our Georgia Sports Championship glory. That's all we talk about that.
Yeah, but back to the Steelers. Yeah, so they won't have a home playoff game at all this postseason, depending how far they go. But yeah, Big Ben. Maybe one last ride for him. They haven't won a playoff game since 2016.
Newsflash, that won't change.
Yeah, they started 1-3 on the season, then they won 4 straight to go 5-3. And then they had the infamous tie with the Lions with Mason Rudolph at quarterback. And then they pretty much stayed around 500 the rest of the year. And like I said, just kind of somehow found a way into the playoffs. But
I am not liking this team at all, Rook. There really is not a lot to like overall. Big Ben has always been kind of a questionable guy in terms of his character.
I mean, the wide receivers that have been in and out of the team. Chase Claypool with the moment he had a couple weeks ago with the kind of showing up
and
the
then
first
the fans,
down
of course, think no one can do any wrong on that team. There's two guys who, really stick out for them, though, and that's Najee Harris and TJ Watt, who are both, have had really good years, especially TJ Watt, who did tie the NFL sack record, did not beat Michael Strahan's record, though they could retroactively go through some of the footage and maybe give him a sack on something. But as it stands right now, he is tied. And I kind of expect him to get a sack in this game. But really, I think that's going to be the only highlight for the Steelers. You tell me anything they have right now that can win them this game.
Yeah, no, I mean it's very hard to do it. They have the worst rush besides TJ Watt. They got the worst rush defense in terms of yards allowed. So see whatever running back for the Chiefs to kind of feast in this ball game.
If not Patrick to feast too.
You do have Najee Harris on offense, who's just been kind of force fed the ball. He had 307 attempts and then 94 targets, which were both second in the NFL in terms of running backs this season. So definitely force feeding the rookie and giving him all the touches he can carry. He is coming into this game dealing with an elbow injury, so I think he should be out there, but it's something that he sustained during their Week 18 game, so definitely something to monitor.
Yeah.
And then Juju, who's been out for pretty much all this season with a shoulder injury, they're saying that he's healthy and recovered from that shoulder injury, but not expected to play. He's been practicing on like a very limited basis.
Yeah, probably. You don't want to throw him in on an offense that's been practicing with other guys and giving other guys reps.
Yeah, Deontay Johnson will definitely be their main pass catcher. 107 catches, 1,161 yards, 8 touchdowns, and then mix in Chase Claypool for Big Ben to try and limp his way into throwing a big pass.
And then Pat Freiermuth, has started to develop as a tight end one for them.
Yeah, being the new Heath Miller.
Yeah.
He's got his own chant too, so.
Oh, goodness.
With the Muth.
I like it. The Muth is Luth.
Yes, exactly. We talked about their previous meeting a couple weeks ago, how the Chiefs dominated, and in terms of what to expect in this one, kind of expect the same thing. I think it will be a blowout, and the Steelers should just be happy that they were able to give Big Ben one last playoff opportunity.
Yeah, and, finally, right into the sunset, Big Ben. Go just find a place in a pasture to lay down, because this is not the kind of game that they have a chance at. This Steelers team shouldn't have even been there, and they're gonna have a hard time beating the Chiefs.
The only thing I'll say is Mike Tomlin as an underdog. That's the only faith that they have to find some playoff magic.
It is gonna be cold there, I assume, because it is Kansas City. Yeah. Just imagine Big Ben with his fat face under that helmet. Because it's loud in Arrowhead, he's gonna be putting his hands on the side and then the heat and the hand warmers.
I can picture it now.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. They're gonna be wearing their whites. I don't know. Yeah, I'm just imagining
trying to picture everything, and then just look up at the scoreboard and it's 42-3.
Yeah, I don't think that bad, but maybe.
All right, so let's go into the final game. Yep, Monday Night Football, and what a game we got between division rivals, and that is the 5-seed Cardinals, 11-6 on the season, against the 4-seed, the NFC West division champ, LA Rams, 12-5 on the season. They're a 4-point favorite at home.
The battle of the young coaches with McVay versus Kingsbury Roach. This is a heavyweight bout between these two guys. This is going to be the battle of who's the smarter coach, and you can make a case for both teams. I think so.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is going to be kind of like the Patriots and the Bills, and then the Cowboys and 49ers. I think those 3 games are probably going to be the 3 best games during this wild card weekend. This was the Rams' first division title since 2018. And remember all the offseason buzz that they had with trading away Jared Goff to the Lions, getting Matthew Stafford in here, and then midseason making some other acquisitions with getting Von Miller and then Odell Beckham Jr. So they were kind of labeled as the super team. They had a little bit of a struggle midseason where they lost 3 in a row, but they finished out the season on a 5-game win streak. They lost their last game this season, but they finished winning 5 out of the last 6 after a 7-1 start. So that's why they're the division champs, and they've got all sorts of firepower just all over the place. There's a reason why they were labeled a super team.
Yeah, and their biggest guy is going to be Cooper Kupp, Roach.
Yeah.
145 catches, the triple crown for receivers, 1,900 receiving yards, 16 touchdowns, led all receivers in each category. That is a good for a triple crown for the receiver. Awesome. He's been their guy, bar none, and just such a good connection with Stafford, who's also had himself a great year with 480,000 pass yards,
480,000? No, 4,886.
Wow, that was a brain fart. I was going to say, that would have been a lot of pass yards. 4,886, which I deal with a lot of numbers with work, and I am just so over numbers.
Maybe I'll throw in some commas or something for you instead of just putting numbers.
Put them in like brackets or something. Make an Excel spreadsheet.
Get it to you by 5 o'clock.
41 touchdowns, but the one thing that does stick out is 17 interceptions, including a few stinkers recently.
4 pick sixes, I think.
Yeah, he does lead the league in pick sixes. And we've seen some more bad performances, even though they were wins recently, and also the loss to end the season.
Yeah, he's been kind of comparable to Dak Prescott in terms of he's had like those great like all-star games where it's like this was such a great move for them to finally get like their quarterback with this great offense. And then he's had some of these games, like when he's had the pick sixes and stuff, where it's like, what is he doing out there? Like he's had some really bad looking games. You think about that Texans game that they lost a couple weeks ago, the Texans, and he just had an awful game. So he's definitely had his moments this year where you can't have that in the playoffs, but he's definitely leading the way for this offense. Him and Cooper Kupp have that amazing connection. They've got Van Jefferson. Odell Beckham's had 5 touchdowns in 8 games with the Rams this season. Sony Michel's now their lead running back with Darrell Henderson hurt. They've got Cam Akers back into the fold coming off the Achilles injury.
Yeah,
might sprinkle him in a little bit.
And Achilles is a lot, and that's going to be hard to get him back.
He only had like 5 touches in their Week 18 game, so expect it to mainly be Sony Michel with a little bit of Cam Akers. But Cam was the guy that stepped up for them last postseason.
Yeah, they've had a great offensive line. Obviously with Whitworth being
Whitworth, the ageless wonder.
Yeah, the like 39, 40-year-old guy from LSU leading the line. And for a guy like Sonny Michel to have 845 yards and 4 touchdowns for not being a lead back is nice. Just kind of a plug and play.
That was another trade. I forgot to even mention it, but that was right before the season started. Right at the end of the preseason, they trade for Sonny Michel for like a 6th-round pick away from the Patriots, and you see now he was their leading rusher in terms of numbers this season. So.
And then Odell, despite a few random burst of a few games where he looked like he wasn't getting the ball, did have 5 touchdowns in 8 games, so that's a pretty good ratio.
In terms of the receiving yards, it's mainly going to Cooper Kupp and some of the other guys, but he has been
Van Jefferson as well.
He has been a big red zone target for them, which has been nice. So we'll see if he does that in the stretch run of the playoffs.
Yeah.
But a big loss for them on defense, their safety Jordan Fuller, who was their play caller. He suffered a season-ending ankle injury in Week 18. So they signed the 37-year-old Eric Weddle out of retirement, who actually finished his career, played the last couple seasons with the Rams. Is that right?
Ravens.
So he had the majority of his career was with the Rams.
Yeah.
And so they signed him out of retirement. I think he's 37 now, but he's apparently going to be taking over at the safety position, and Jalen Ramsey will take over as the play caller, the guy giving the plays to the rest of the defense.
Interesting. I don't know how much that's going to affect. And you got to look at a guy like Eric Weddle coming out to he's going to be,
What kind of health is he in? Like a 37-year-old safety.
Who had injury concerns toward the end of his season, end of his career. Let's flip to the other side. That's going to be the Cardinals, who for the longest time were the team of the NFL leading Roach. We really were both on the bandwagon for them.
Yeah, they were the last undefeated team, 7-0 to start out the season, and then just kind of limped through the second half. Everyone saw all the numbers that were getting put up on Cliff Kingsbury in his coaching career in the second half of seasons, how bad he had been. They were an 8-8 team last season after they started out 6-2. This is their first playoff appearance since 2015. They did have that big win in the last couple weeks against Dallas, but we'll see how they go against the divisional foe. The 2 teams split this season with the Rams winning the most recent matchup in Week 14.
Yeah. And like we said, kind of the last undefeated team. They were also the first to double-digit wins, I'm pretty sure. Maybe the Packers might have beat them, but I know they were close.
Yeah, and the Packers were kind of bouncing back and forth.
And for them, it's the name of the game has been Kyler. Though Kyler did miss some few games, we saw Colt McCoy come in. He still finished with 3,000. I did say 3,000.
Yeah.
787 yards, 27 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 423 rush yards, and 5 touchdowns on the ground, which is funny because 423 rush yards there's not as many yards he ran because he runs.
Oh yeah, all over the place, kind of like the Pat Mahomes in the Super Bowl with all the yards.
It's like
he ran
37 yards, I think, from sideline to sideline. I think he ran probably the sideline to sideline at least 3 times a game total.
Well, and you've seen him now be much more effective as a rusher because he did have the ankle injury, and I think he was still kind of rehabbing from that even when he was back in there. But you've seen over the past couple of games, he had a big run, like a 60-something yard run. He's had a couple of games where he's had over 50 rush yards, so he's kind of started to get that back into his game, and I think that's very necessary for this offense to succeed, especially since they'll be without DeAndre Hopkins, their number one receiver, who's missed the past couple weeks with the injury.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting who else they have, Roach, to throw to. You look at a guy like Christian Kirk and A.J. Green, who A.J. Green's been playing a little better, but still not as well as a guy like D-Hop can.
Yeah, both guys had over 850 receiving yards this season. They have a very deep receiving core as well.
Yeah. Running the ball, though, they've been led by James Conner, who has 752 rush yards.
Huge free agent acquisition
but then
for him.
15 touchdowns on the ground, which is second in the NFL. Awesome numbers. Also, Chase Edmonds has played pretty good in his time that he's been there. He's been a little bit banged up, though, as we've seen.
Pretty much everyone on their offense has been banged up this season, so you saw Colt McCoy come in there and have a couple great games, so it's been nice for them to be able to find some replacements for these guys that haven't been in the lineup. And going into this game, Chase Edmonds, who missed last week's game, will play. James Conner hasn't been practicing this week with a rib injury. He's a game-time decision. He did play last week, so they're flip-flop right now.
Yeah.
I mentioned DeAndre Hopkins won't play. And then J.J. Watt, who we thought was going to be out for the season, he practiced on a very limited basis as well. He's probably not going to play in this ballgame, but could potentially see him if they get further on into the playoffs. DeAndre Hopkins, I think they said NFC Championship would be the first chance to see him back. So if the Cardinals are able to, if the Cardinals are able to get an upset win against LA, they'd face off against the Packers the following week probably. So it could be some tough sledding for them. But if they're able to make it in a deep playoff run, they could get some of these big guys back.
That's a big if, Roach, for them. And I think for them, the order might be too big and the spotlight could be too big because they are going against a Rams team that I think has more talent easily than they do. Even though I love Kyler and I want to see them succeed, I just think they got too hot in the middle of the season and they kind of cooled off and they just have been limping since. So I think that's what's going to be the ultimate. It'd be their downfall. Yeah,
this is a very tough game to decide just because both these teams are very similar. Like coming from the same division, they split the season series. There's just so many similarities within dynamic offenses. Both of them have above average defense as well. We didn't even mention the Cardinals defense, but it's a decent defense. So it's very tough to try and gauge what you're going to get from both these teams. So this is probably the toughest game to decide.
I'm ultimately myself giving the edge to the Rams. And I just think that's because the spotlight might be too big for Arizona at the current moment.
I think the one reason why I would probably give the edge to the Rams as well is just based on playoff experience.
Yeah,
we talk about McVay making it to the Super Bowl. Cliff Kingsbury, how he struggled in the second half. This is their first playoff appearance with Cliff Kingsbury. You're not at full strength, whereas the Rams are pretty much at full strength besides Darrell Henderson.
And it's a home game for the Rams, too.
Yeah,
which I don't think it's that big of a home field advantage, but, it's definitely harder to go into a team's opposing stadium and win than try to win in your own.
Yeah, I definitely think everything is kind of leaning more towards the Rams in this one, but I would not be surprised if the Arizona would need to play just about a near perfect game. No mistakes from Kyler on offense. The defense would need Matt Stafford to force a pick six from him. But yeah, I think I would lean slightly towards the Rams in this one as well.
As much as I want a Packers, Cardinals NFC Championship game, which I don't even think would be possible, but right now, because I think they have to face each other next round, I just don't think it's going to happen, Roach, just because I think the Rams are going to be able to take this one.
Yeah, so that ends up finishing out our playoff, the Super Wildcard Weekend preview. We finally got through it, but we wanted to give kind of a briefing of all the teams that were in the playoffs. We'll probably have another preview show next week when we get into the divisional round. Probably be a little bit shorter since there'll be less games to talk about. We've already kind of given our synopsis of the teams that have made it into the playoffs. We might have some other stuff that we talk about as well, but probably have something out next week for y'all.
Yeah, but just a general outlook, guys. We'll probably have something next week. Definitely setting for NFC Championship game. And then we'll probably do a recap on the teams that didn't make the playoffs before the Super Bowl show. And then we'll probably have like a postseason show, maybe some pre-draft stuff, looking forward. And then obviously we'll get us into April towards the draft when we will get back up and start getting heavy again for the season.
Yeah, we'll start getting back into like our one show a week again since we had a little bit of a break with Christmas and the holidays, New Year's and everything like that. We were traveling a little bit too, but hopefully get back into a more consistent schedule now that we're into the postseason. But as always, guys, thank you for tuning into the Couch Quarterbacks podcast. For Andrew Roachford, that's Ben Steinberg, and we will see you guys on the flip side.